Hello, everyone, and welcome back to another episode of Multifamily with our amazing queen in multifamily, Veena Jetti. Thank you for coming today.
Thank you for having me.
And today we're going to talk about doing makeovers, like in the case of buildings, of course.
I thought we were going to talk about makeup today. I was ready for it.
Well, of course, I mean, we can talk about it
We can
later.
do both.
Yeah, we can do both. Yeah, this is kind of like the makeup of a building.
I love it.
And so when it comes to makeovers or improvements in this case, what are some of the most common improvements that you have seen that your assets needed?
Yeah, so depending on the age of the building, on the interior side, right, one of the major things we're looking at is countertops. So can we add granite? Do we need to add granite or quartz? Adding hardwood flooring. And when I say hardwood, I mean like LVT throughout. Other common is lighting fixtures, plumbing fixtures. If you want to be more green efficient, maybe you're putting in low flow toilets, low flow shower heads, LED bulbs, stuff like that. I know you asked me for the most common, but it really depends on the asset. And so these are some of the common ones we see on the interior, painting, adding backsplashes, stainless steel. I love when an asset has washer and dryer hookups and no washers and dryers, because that's an opportunity for us to add efficiency to the asset and also add a value add component by increasing rent by providing full size washer and dryer. So that's always a fun one. So there's a lot of different ones on the interior. On the exterior, almost immediately when we go in and we take over an asset, we start doing a full power wash on the buildings. And we also like to restripe the parking lot. It's like a quick, easy way. It lets residents know that there's new management. We care about the community. We're going to make it look nice. We're going to improve it. We're going to make it a pretty place for you to live. And so those are two really easy ones on the exterior. We also see CapEx dollars that go toward revitalizing dog parks, playgrounds. Sometimes like pool areas need to be spruced up. Fitness areas, sometimes we can redo the gym or add a bar studio or a yoga studio or CrossFit. And those are really well received. We also sometimes add outdoor gym equipment, grill areas, walkways, landscaping. Those are all areas where you can easily improve the exterior of a building.
And if anything, from what I'm hearing, it looks like more targeted towards making the life of your tenant better.
Yeah.
Instead of like structural damages that you're fixing.
Yeah, look, if there's structural damage, we will fix it. But generally speaking, our target is going to be to revitalize a community. That's the whole value that we're adding to the community. We're not just trying to go in and push rents up and call it a day. Residents aren't going to be very happy if they're not getting anything in return. So instead, what we're doing is we're going in, we're increasing the value of the property by revitalizing the community, investing into the community, making it nicer, making it somewhere that our residents want to live and they want to refer other good residents to live.
That's right. Have you had any issues in the past with the community that was already living there by you coming in and taking over an asset?
Oh, sure. I mean, there are always tenants that are going to be upset about new management. There are always at this scale, there's always somebody who's upset who thinks that you're not doing right by them or you don't care. But the reality is we're not like a multi-billion-dollar hedge fund, right? We're another family that's coming in and we're trying to treat our residents the way that we want to be treated if we were living in these communities. So we absolutely try to stay true to that. But yeah, you're always going to have some amount of tenants that are upset. They don't like change. And I get it. Change is scary for a lot of people. And that's why it's up to us to really make sure that there's a warm transition and that the transition is as smooth as possible.
And also, I feel like adding those new commodities within the buildings, it's a way of letting them know, I know that this is a change, but we're here to make a good change, not a bad change.
Yeah, we try to make it exciting for them. So we try to get them their buy-in to the business plan, right? Like, hey, if you could add one thing to here where you live, what would that look like? We do surveys. We do a lot of resident events too. So we try to foster that community and let them get to know who our management staff is, who their neighbors are. So we're fostering that sense of community.
And now when it comes to all of these improvements, what are some of the big no-nos for all of these renovations?
Yeah, so the first one is don't over improve the area. If you don't need to put granite countertops in the area or in this asset in that area, for example, don't do it because you're unnecessarily spending capital expenditure dollars. You're not going to get the ROI you need for that investment to have been worth it. So that's one big no-no. A second big no-no is don't cut expenses just for the sake of cutting expenses, right? Because then you're going to end up with a bunch of deferred maintenance. So for example, if your roof is leaking, fix your roof. Don't just defer it. And some people do this and
Oh, wow.
they don't either don't have the money for it or they don't want to expend the dollars on it, which I get, but fix the roof.
That's right. I mean, it's like a structural damage, but at the same time, you have to take care of your investment. I mean,
Exactly.
it's not only taking care of your investment, it's taking care of also your tenants, which are your partners in this business.
Right, exactly. You want to plan for the long term and in mind.
And when it comes to all of these improvements that you do on your assets, how do you come up with the capital? I mean, how do you raise that capital for funding all of this?
So when we're raising the equity of the deal, so right in the beginning, when we know we're raising X amount of dollars for equity, that's when we also plan the CapEx spend. So we already know, hey, we're going to spend $2 million plus a $500,000 contingency. So in addition to the equity we raise the CapEx budget as well.
So you already have those funds before you actually start doing the renovations.
Yeah, it's interesting that you asked that because some people will raise the equity just for the deal and then maybe a small amount of the capital expenditures, and then they'll raise the rest of it through operational cash flow, which means investors might not get paid at the moment that the cash flow is being produced because it's being reinvested into the property. But what happens then is the equity becomes more valuable because you're revitalizing the community. You're utilizing those dollars to be CapEx instead. So it's, one hand washes the other. In our deals, we tend to raise it ahead of time, or we can sometimes finance it. So you can sometimes get a line of credit for a little bit cheaper. So really what you're doing when you're deciding how to fund your deal is you're trying to figure out the most efficient way to stack your capital.
What happens if, like, throughout the process of the renovations, the prices ended up changing on how much you're going to be spending on those?
They always do. They always change. So you have to always go in assuming that pricing is going to go up and that it's always going to take longer than any contractor tells you it's going to take.
Gotcha.
So with that, we go in and we plan with a significant contingency budget. Not only do we line item contingency. So for example, if we're spending $10,000 on on backsplashes, right? I'm making this up, but let's say we're spending $10,000 on backsplashes. We might actually budget for $11,000 instead of $10,000. And in addition to that, we might put a $500,000 contingency budget in, or $10,000 of whatever budget in as a contingency. So we always have contingency. So there's plenty of room for us to have pricing adjust without it really affecting our ability to operate the investment efficiently.
And how do you go about calculating how much to budget as an extra contingency?
Yeah, so the more you budget as contingency, the more conservative you're being. I would say at a minimum, you want like a 5% contingency. You could go up to 10, 20, 30% contingency. So the more contingency you have, the more room there is for things to not go the way you think they're going to go. And so you want to just be mindful of what is the most amount of room you can have in your contingency budget without pushing it over the line. So it's walking a fine line, because if you push it over the line, what happens is your equity returns drop significantly. So you want to try to play with it. I would say usually about 10 to 15% is a very robust contingency budget. In today's market, with the way things are rising and with inflation, maybe 20% is a little bit better. So it just kind of depends.
And when it comes to, after you have done all of these renovations, how much more should we be calculating on, like, the rents, for example? Because you also have to increase the rents after having done all of this.
Yeah, so that's where it's market dependent. It depends what the market is calling for. You'll know, or you theoretically should know before you enter the asset. So if your competition has granite countertops, stainless steel, luxury vinyl tile flooring, and a fresh coat of paint with a backsplash, and you're going to go and you're going to do the exact same thing, and let's say they're getting $400 more a month in rent, theoretically you would be able to get that same $400 more in rent. Now, would I underwrite to that? Probably not. I'd probably underwrite to maybe $200 or $250, knowing that if we don't quite achieve that premium, we'll still be okay.
Right. And it's always good to evaluate, in this case, what the the market is doing around
Exactly.
Because otherwise you wouldn't get any ideas on what things you actually need or how much to price it. Any other tips that you can give us so we don't over expend on all of these renovations?
Yeah, so the general rule of thumb that we like to follow is if it doesn't repay our investment within 3 years from the rent increase, it's generally not the right investment. Now, I say that because sometimes it still makes sense to do it. So again, it really depends. But for example, if I'm going to put $3,600 into paint, stainless steel, backsplash, and I'm going to be able to charge an extra $100 a month, in 36 months, that would have paid back the total investment that I put in. The ROI would be there. So I think that makes sense. A lot of times we can get it back in like 2 years or 2.5 years, but I'd say like 3 years is like a pretty good standard to consider. So for every dollar you put in, you want to be able to receive that back over the period of 3 years.
That's right. And I feel like the key takeaway on this is that make sure that any renovations that you're about to do truly make sense, even before you purchase the deal.
Yes. Otherwise, it's a very expensive mistake to make.
That's true. Yeah. You don't want to get into that trouble in the middle of the renovation.
Exactly.
Thank you so much, Veena.
Thank you.
And thank you to our audience. So there you have it. Plan ahead. Make sure that you have enough of your budget to do the renovations that you need to have a competitive asset. We're going to see you in the next episode. Bye-bye.